Well, it looks like everybody's, we have almost everybody here. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good, thank you. So this is AP1. This is 2010 A13. And so we meet this time on Tuesday and Thursday. And labs are this week on Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, and Thursday afternoon. So if you're in my lab, you're going to be in one of those at 1 o'clock today. And just go over a few of the ground rules here for this class. Many of you are probably here because you're interested in some sort of healthcare field, and that's great. This is a great class for that. We have a real good track record of people that come through this class and then go on and enter in the nursing program or radiology, or I guess it's called radiography or free imaging now, and other, whatever you're interested in healthcare. if you do well in this class, you have a pretty good chance of getting into one of those programs. It is one of the hurdles you have to jump through. So this is probably one of your most important classes. It's very important to get an A or a B in this class, preferably an A. And I'll say this again when we get into lab, because I know people get focused on getting good grades on everything, but if it comes between the lecture and the lab, always choose the lecture, because the lab isn't used for anything, for any kind of evaluation purposes. It just helps or hurts your GPA just a little bit. Lab's only 1 credit hour, so it can't help or hurt either way. Now, all your content for the class can be found in eLearn, all the PowerPoints, all the PDF files of for the PowerPoints. You can print them out and use them to take notes. You have all the additional videos that are useful in there. Let's see what else is found in eLearn. The schedule of the sequence, really, what we're going to do, starting with chapter 1 and ending with chapter 13 or 14 at the end of November. And we have the syllabus is found in there, and study guides. There's a study guide for every exam embedded in there too, so you can go in there and use that. I highly recommend the study guide. There's also a review and a study guide for the final exam found in eLearn. Now, as far as a textbook goes, we use a free ebook known as, cleverly called, Anatomy and Physiology. That's appropriate for this class. And it's free from OpenStax. And OpenStax is a free source of textbooks run through Rice University. So it's a legitimate organization, and they have a very nice A&P book that you can view online, or you can download it and print it out as a PDF file. I don't know if I want to do all 700 pages through my printer, but you can print out the appropriate chapters. The nice thing about A&P books is that they all tend to follow the same pattern. So whether you get OpenStax or whether you go down to McKay's and pick up a 10-year-old copy of one of the quality A&P textbooks they have down there for $10, and they have a lot, or you can order something from Amazon. They're all pretty much going to follow the same pattern. So you don't necessarily have to have OpenStax. You can if you want to. One nice advantage of having a hard copy is you have something you can carry around and use as a reference later on. I know that in healthcare, particularly the further along you go, the more material you have to carry around with you to look stuff up, because you can't keep everything in your head. And sometimes it's just nice to have a book around that you can look stuff up in. So anyway, there is no requirement to buy a textbook. You can go get the eLearn book, the ebook from OpenStax. If you need the link for that, I thought I posted it, but if not, I'll go ahead and I can send it to everybody again. And you can print out the appropriate sections. So that's we decided a number of years ago that we got tired of seeing students pay $300 for a textbook when they change every couple of years. So we thought, well, let's look at our options. So lots of us have gone to OpenStax, others have gone to other books that are ebook formats, but we're all covering the same material. It's one nice thing about A&P book writers. They don't have a lot of variation. Okay, having said that, let's talk a little bit about the course. We're going to do a lecture course. We have 5 lecture exams in here and a final exam. The final exam is comprehensive. The lecture exams are all worth 100 points. The final exam is worth 100 points. The first lecture exam will cover chapters 1 and 2, and it won't be scheduled until we finish that content. Now the exams are all given through e-learn using the lockdown browser. And that's a requirement. And I'll tell you this, if you try to take the exam on a Chromebook using the lockdown browser, it won't work. So if you need to take the exam on a different computer, that's fine. If you have to take it in the library, that's fine. Just don't expect it to work on a Chromebook. I don't know why it doesn't work, but it doesn't work on a Chromebook. So the exams are going to become they'll be available after we finish the content. What I do is I usually open them up for about a week to 10 days, give you a nice long window to get ready for the exam, and then go take it whenever you're ready. You know, we don't have a class meeting time for the exam like we would if we were on the ground. It's still timed. You still have 60 minutes to take it. It's only 50 questions, and that's usually more than enough to take a 50-question test. So, and then the final exam is 100 questions, and it is worth 100 points. We have during exam week in the past, we've had a set time to meet for the exam. But what I usually do is on the day of the exam is due, I usually open it up at 12 a.m. right after midnight, 12:01 a.m. just to make sure, and then leave it open for 24 hours. So you have so we stay within that exam day. It's still timed, but you have all day to take it, because I know that schedules and stuff are going to interfere with things. Speaking of schedules, life happens. This is my 18th year of teaching this class and at Walter State, and I've seen everything happen in those 18 years. So when something happens that intrudes on your schedule, and you know about it ahead of time, let me know. When you don't know about it and it just happens, let me know. It's not the end of the world. There's not a lot I can't fix for you as far as resetting times and dates and things like that. So if you have an issue, we can fix it. If you're taking an exam and your computer dies in the middle of it, and that's happened. If your Wi-Fi goes out, and that's happened, I mean, I can see that at my end. I can see when your computer locks up and dies. I can also see if you go through an hour, 100-question exam in 5 minutes, say, well, that looks funny. So the point is, though, that there is, I can help. Just tell me. We've had, I've had everything happen in this over the past 18 years, or going on 18 years. So kids get sick. Houses catch on fire. I hope not, but they do. People wreck their cars. Cars get broken into. People have to go to court for various reasons. These are all things that are going to happen. It snows. A pandemic comes along that we weren't expecting, and so things like that are going to happen. Hopefully not too often. While this is August, and it's unlikely that snow would affect us, even since we're online, power lines go down and we lose power and we lose internet. So don't worry if things get in the way. We can always work around it. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I got one more good she's here. And so Sophie, I wasn't ignoring you. I just didn't see your name there for a few minutes. So I have you in. I've taken attendance as you enter the waiting room. I've been taking attendance that way so I can report this that you've all attended. So for today, so you'll be fine with that one. Let's see what else. Normally I'd talk all about fire drills and staying awake in class and things like that. So but we don't need to worry about that. if you need to see me, meet with me for any reason. I can do a Zoom meeting. I can even meet on campus if you need to. If you need advice on study habits and things like that, I can tell you right now that some of the best study habits you can do to prepare for the exams, while it sounds really old-fashioned, flashcards. Because the way our brain works, if you create a flashcard, you write a question down, and then you look up the answer and put it on the back of the card. Well, you've just stored that information in your brain in 3 different areas. From the question, from the answer, and then writing it down. Believe it or not, you store it in 3 different areas in your brain. And every time you quiz yourself with that flashcard, you're going to reinforce that in at least 2 different areas. And so that works really well. Another really good way is to practice teaching the content of the exam to somebody else. Whether it is your grandma or your dog or you set up a Zoom link with somebody else and you go back and forth teaching each other the content. That works wonders. That's how I got through organic chemistry when I was an undergraduate. My roommate and I were both taking organic, and he was a real chem whiz, and I was taking organic was taking me. But we taught it to each other, and it helped an awful lot. That's a great way to retain information. Normally, I would also say form study groups, but with the pandemic and everything, that I'm not going to say that. But study groups form in AP1 that I've seen last all the way through the nursing program. So 3 or 4 years of study groups, people working together, teaching each other material, reviewing material before exams, and things like that. Those work great. So if you can form a study group, even if it's a Zoom study group, that works really well too. So those are some of the best ways that I've seen people do very, very well in the past. I was a big fan of flashcards when I was an undergraduate, and I was also one of those that would rewrite my lecture notes. Same principle. I take my classroom notes and rewrite them so they were legible. I don't know why, because I never went back and looked at them, and nobody else did either. But well, that's not fair. People actually borrowed my notes and copied them several times. So the point was that every time you go over material in a different way, you reinforce it. So just sitting down and reading over the book or reading over your notes isn't enough. Writing notes to yourself or rewriting your notes is another way of reinforcing, placing that information in your brain in a different area of your brain. So it's a useful tool. Boring as all get out, but it's a useful tool. Okay. Need to get a hold of me, send me an email through eLearn and through the regular WS email. I get my eLearn email pops up also on my WS account. And so you'll probably see me answering twice a lot of times, simply because I want to make sure you got my answer. So I'll get back to you within a day on that one. The lectures are going to be recorded, and then I post them in YouTube. What I'm trying this year is to leave them, is to send you the link. We'll see how that goes. That way I don't have to make them open for the public completely. It helps maintain our privacy issues. Because in the past I would try to cut off the front part of this part where everybody's picture shows up. But if I leave it where only those with the link to see it, that theoretically maintains privacy. So they should show up in YouTube at the end of the day. It takes a while because these lectures are an hour and a half long, and it usually takes a while for YouTube to render that and get it placed in there. So, and I've got 3 classes to do for that. So we'll see, but they should be posted on my YouTube channel within a day, so you can view them again. And if you've missed something, or I wasn't clear on something you did, or missed half the class, your internet died, your cat walks across your computer, and if you have a cat, or your dog, you have a cat, you know what I'm talking about. If you have a dog that likes to jump up in your lap, you know what I'm talking about too. I've got both. And if you lose half your lecture real time, you can go back and watch it later. If you have to work, if your work schedule changes, it's out there on YouTube for you to watch. So we'll have it for the recordings are listed by date. So like today will be August 24th, AP1 Lecture 1. And so you can go back in and view it again if you want to. Grade scale is the standard scale, 90 to 100. So 90% of 600. There's 600 possible points. So if you get a 540, if you add up all your exam scores and it comes up to 540, you got an A. Now, the percentage-wise, if you are within a half a percentage point to the next highest grade, I'll roll you over. For example, if you have a 69.5 average, then that would roll over to a C. If you have a 79.5, that would roll over to a C. 89.5 would roll over to an A. So that's my cutoff point to, roll you, it's not a curve, but to just roll you to the higher score. Just if you're concerned, just give me something to work with. I mean, I'm more than willing to go back and check exams, because I know that YouTube has a nasty habit of changing questions around and marking, giving credit for the wrong answer. So if you think that you marked something correct and it changed, I'll be happy to go through your exam and look at it. So I will also tell you that the exams are all different. While the content is the same, I have a test bank for each exam, around 300 or 400 questions. The questions are chosen randomly, and they are then placed in a unique order for every exam, and the answers are all randomized too. So if you and a friend are both taking this class and you get to take your exams, so if you were sitting side by side trying to help each other answer questions, well, first of all, you would probably end up spending way too much time doing that, and you'd run out of time. But second of all, the questions are all going to be different. So, and the order of the answers, even if the questions were identical, the order of the answers would be different too. So, so it's just, I'm not, it's just the way we do to try and make sure that you can really show what you know instead of trying to look stuff up as you go along. So anyway, enough on that. Anyone have any questions before we try to get started?
How do we go on your YouTube channel? How do we look you up for recording?
Okay, well, today I'll send you a link for it, but it's my YouTube channel has my name on it. It's called WG Scrote. You go into YouTube and look it up like that. So, but I'll send you today. I'm going to try to send the links as I post the videos to everybody. If that doesn't become too tedious, then I'll continue that. So otherwise, I'll change everything to public, and then you can just go in and look it up. Any other questions?
On the book, do you happen to have the number on that, the ISBN number by chance? I think I have the correct one. I found it on Amazon. Just for my benefit, I thought it'd be easier to have a hard copy.
Not off the top of my head,
That's
but
okay.
it I don't even know if they've changed editions since we started doing this, but if it's the OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology, then that's it.
Okay.
Has an orange and gray cover, I think. That's it. That's it.
Okay, that's the one that I found on there.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're fine. How much did it cost you?
It was $50.
Well, that's a whole lot better than.
And it's available on Amazon Prime for those who have Prime. Just
Okay. Well, that's a lot better than 300. So
yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I will tell you also for lab, there are no lab books. Everything, all the lab content is found in eLearn. So we knocked out that cost for you too. The bookstore in the old days used to bundle a lab book and a textbook and a coloring book and an atlas of the human body together and charge exorbitant. That's not fair. Charge a profit, make a profitable return on that combination and stuff we never used. Speaking of lab, and I'll talk about this again this afternoon. What I'm going to try to do is our classroom for lecture and lab, when we eventually get back in the ground, hopefully next semester for AP2, is 217. It's upstairs in Maples Marshall. If you're on the Sevierville campus, you can take advantage of this. I'm going to start putting models as we go through models of bones and muscles and things like that, microscopes. I want to start setting them out in 217. If you want to take the time to go and look at this, particularly when we get into bones and muscles, this might be helpful. The classroom is during the day, it's usually open, but if it's locked, all you have to do is ask the campus police or the office staff to unlock it for you, because I'm letting them know that it's okay for students to come in, because everything should be set out on tables in there. So I should be the only one that's using that classroom this time. So if you're on, if you are on the Sevierville campus, then you can take advantage of this, but it's not required. Okay, let's get going here then. Anybody have any other questions? Okay, then I'm going to see if I can get my, give me 1 second here to load up. See if I got the right PowerPoints present. Next, take a second to pull that up.
Mr. Sprout,
Yes.
is the lab class strictly online, or will you be having class in person?
It is strictly online.
Okay.
Yeah, everything is Zoom. We set this up in January of this year when the pandemic was still roaring around, and then because we didn't know any better, and then in May when things seemed like it was cleaning up, we thought, oh well, gee, but we can't. Once we set it, we couldn't change it. So then now with Delta coming back, coming through here, we actually look pretty smart, at least for A&P. So yes, everything will be is in Zoom. So the Zoom link for the labs, I think I sent one out to everybody for each class. And it's also in the news section. So like if you didn't see the email, go into your lab e-learn course, and the very first screen that opens up is news, and like the second or third item down gives you the link for the class.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. Okay, everybody should see the slide. It says Introduction to the Human Body on here. I hope. I always ask because every now and then I'll get started. I'll be talking and someone will eventually say, "Oh, we don't see that slide." So, and that's okay if you do, because mistakes happen. Okay, here we go. So we are starting out with chapter 1 on the term Introduction to the Human Body, Anatomy and Physiology. We're going to start talking about terminology. Terminology is very important when you're dealing with healthcare, because you need to have consistency. You have to, it isn't enough to say it's down there or it's up there. We have to be consistent. We have to use terminology that is the same for everybody. We have to use terms like dorsal for the back and ventral for the front, anterior for above and posterior for below, superior and inferior. We have to use the proper terms because everybody uses those terms in healthcare. So we all know what they mean. In communication is very, very important. Now, I know this is an old clip from an old science fiction movie. This is from the original Frankenstein movie. And why do I put this on here? Well, it's a very subtle point. But when Dr. Frankenstein turns around, he announces it's alive. Not he's alive, but it's alive. Because Boris Karloff, laying there in the slab as the monster, was put together. And so it's an it. The monster is an it. And so he's being very precise here. And it's a very subtle point. I like old monster movies anyway. Okay, so communication is very, very important. Now we're looking at anatomy and physiology. Anatomy and physiology are intertwined. You can't get away from them. Anatomy is structure, how things fit together. Why do our bones fit together the way they do? Why are our muscles attached to bones? What is the structure of our heart and our lungs? How do these all interact with each other? This is structure of body parts. Physiology, which is actually my personal favorite, is how do they work? What's their function? What are the chemical reactions that take place in your body? Why does a healthy individual that eats an apple see a rise in their blood sugar about a half an hour later and then watch it come back down without having to do anything about it? So this is physiology. What is our heartbeat? How does our heart beat? How do we send nerve impulses throughout our body? That's physiology. So the function of the body parts. So structure and function are the two parts of A and P. Now, anatomy can be broken down just like physiology can in the subparts. We can look at anatomy from what's known as gross anatomy, and we're dealing with, that's the macroscopic view. If you're looking at your hand or your finger or an arm or a leg, large structures, looking at it from the surface. What do we see when we take a look at a person? We've all seen where someone says to us, well, you look really healthy today, you look good. Or someone says, well, you look tired, you look worn out. What's going on? Or you look like you're getting sick. Who hasn't heard that when we were growing up? So this is the visible anatomy. Underneath that, we have the microscopic anatomy, the stuff that we can't see without a microscope. And there's two types. There is the individual cells, which is cytology. Put a circle around that and a little star beside it, because that's going to come back haunt you if you don't. Cytology is the study of cells. You're looking through a microscope at a cell or a cluster of cells, and you're looking for changes in the cell. You know, cancer cells look very different than healthy cells, and you're looking at those changes in the individual cells. Histology is the study of tissues. So if you're looking at a cluster of muscle cells, that's tissue. You know, you're looking at a large section of a liver, that's a tissue. So histology is the study of tissues, and cytology are the individual cells themselves. You know, if you're looking at blood cells, you could argue that that's cytology, because you're counting out the number of and types of different white blood cells, for example. Physiology is broken out by organs and organ systems, like the kidney, the heart, the liver, the lungs. We look at how do we communicate to these organ systems? How do we send signals along here? And here we see the heart. You know, why does the heart pump? The heart, 70 times a minute, normal healthy heart rate, 70 beats a minute, again and again and again. And it resets itself and does it every 7/10 of a second. It has the exact, in a healthy heart, it has the exact same sequence of events. That's what you're seeing up here in the upper right picture. There's a 4-chambered heart with valves opening and shutting and contractions taking place. Here we see a human brain. Here we see the processing of nerve activity. You can see how they have the brain illustrated. The brain sections tend to show increased activity, and different different things are taking place. So how do we communicate? Remember, it's all electrical. We are physically charged. We have a charge in our bodies of somewhere between -70 and -90 millivolts. You can measure that. Stick a voltmeter in your skin and get it and measure the charge. I don't know why you want to, but you could, because we are electrical. Over here we see someone. This is somebody swallowing. This is an individual that is swallowing food or fluid, and some really unique activities have to happen here. Swallowing is not as simple as it sounds, because when we swallow, we have our airway right here in the front of our throat, which has to shut so that nothing, food or water, doesn't go down our airway. And behind our airway, we have our esophagus. It has to open up and allow food to pass through there and then close off again, so that when we breathe, we don't breathe air into our stomach. And so we have a whole series of highly choreographed actions taking place here every time we swallow. So we need to understand generation of electrical currents here. We have to, how do we get electrical activity in our bodies? How do we send signals? The speed of a nerve impulse through our bodies approaches 300 miles an hour. And considering that the longest nerve in our body is only about 4 feet long, if that, 300 miles an hour means that to us it's instantaneous. We can't process in our mind 300 miles an hour going over a distance of 3 feet. For us, it's instantaneous. If you stub your toe, you're going to feel the pain instantly. You're going to perceive the pain instantly. But it did take a measurable amount of time to travel from your big toe to your brain to say, hey, that hurts. You could actually measure it, even though it's still traveling at 300 miles an hour. We have to understand pressure. Why do we breathe? How do we breathe? You know, what causes air to rush into our lungs? And what causes air to rush out of our lungs? We'll talk all about that in AP2. Talk about blood pressure. Why is blood pressure important? Why is elevated blood pressure a concern? Why is low blood pressure a concern? And of course, we can't get away from it, but we got to talk about chemistry. This is not a class on chemistry, but you need to understand body chemistry a little bit. You know, how does that affect us? You know, if someone were to ask you, why do you breathe fast after exercise? The common answer would be because we need more oxygen. But the actual answer, and they're going to really tired of hearing me say this over this semester. The real reason we breathe faster after exercise is not to get more oxygen, but to get rid of the carbon dioxide. Our bodies generate carbon dioxide as they release energy. That carbon dioxide is the gas that we're always breathing out. The carbon dioxide will dissolve into our blood plasma and form an acid, carbonic acid. Our brain monitors what we call our pH level, which is a measure of our acid or our base. So our brain can detect an increase in acidity in our blood. It doesn't have to measure CO2, it just measures the acid level. And if our acid level increases, it gets more acidic, our brain says, hey, we better breathe faster because we must have more CO2. Brain makes an assumption that increased acidity is from CO2. That was a long explanation there, but it's a simple chemical question. You know, why is your person breathing fast? Why is your patient breathing faster? Well, they're breathing faster because their brain thinks that their blood work shows that there's a high level of acid in their blood. Maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. But basic chemistry is at work here. And I will tell you here we are in day one, that our body doesn't always play by, our bodies don't always play by the rules. Our brain will process information on what it has, but it won't be able to distinguish increased acidity from one source or another. The brain always assumes that if our blood is getting more acidic, it's because of CO2. And its response is always the same: breathe faster, every time. We're going to talk a lot more about that in AP2. Now, terminology. What about terminology? It isn't just right and left anymore. One of the things that if we were in a classroom, I would demonstrate this by saying, you know, I would hold up a heart model and I would point to the right side of the heart. And you all see it as me pointing to the left side because your perspective is different. So a lot of it is all about perspective. So, but if we use the same terminology, then the perspective disappears. We do know this, that structure and function are intertwined. They are complementary. The function of an organ always reflects its structure. If your goal is to have a pump that sends blood to the lungs to be reloaded with oxygen, and then pump that same blood out to the body, and then collect it and bring it back and pump it to the lungs again, and then pump it to the body and bring it back. You just described a 4-chambered heart. Why do we have a 4-chambered heart? Well, the human heart is actually 2 pumps side by side. On the right-hand side, you have a receiving chamber and a pumping chamber. The right-hand side of the heart pumps blood to the lungs. The left-hand side of the heart has a receiving chamber and also a pumping chamber. The receiving chamber receives that blood that's now high in oxygen from the lungs, and the pumping chamber sends it out to the body. And that comes back around into the receiving chamber again, and the process starts all over again. What better way to make sure that we're always pumping blood to the lungs, to the body, to reload with oxygen and then distribute that oxygen to the systems than to have two separate pumps side by side. The four-chambered heart is ideal. So the structure of the four-chambered heart allows it to do its function. So structure and function are ideal. They work together. If your goal is to allow oxygen to migrate into blood vessels, then you want to have the thinnest membrane possible so we can have something called diffusion, movement across a membrane. So our lungs are, I'll just say, tissue paper thin at the very end, and structures called alveoli. Alveoli have the consistency, I like to say, of single ply wet toilet paper. And that's probably way too thick. But a person breathes in atmospheric air, the air around us, oxygen moves across the alveoli, this very thin tissue, goes through the wall of the capillary, the tiny blood vessel, and then moves on into the blood supply. And yet, we have two cell membranes to go through. Why do we do that? Why can't we just let oxygen come in through our skin from the surface? Well, because it's too thick. We have to have something really thin. So our lungs are designed, the structure of the lungs are designed to allow the gases to pass through. CO2 coming out of the blood, oxygen going into the blood. So the anatomy and the physiology, again, work together. Now, whatever textbook you have, we can't ever seem to escape these pyramid type structures. We have the food pyramid, and we have the organizational pyramid, and we have other things like that. So no matter what we try, no matter what we do, we're stuck with these pyramids. But our body is organized from the least complex to the most complex. The least complex structure, and you're going to see this again, only it's upside, turned on its point later on. The least complex structures in our body are atoms, hydrogen atoms, smallest substance, maintaining an atom is the smallest particle that has the properties of of a substance. An atom of carbon is the smallest substance of carbon, for example, or hydrogen or oxygen. And so we have hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms that combine to form water. We have carbon and hydrogen, oxygen combined to form glucose, sugar. Carbon and oxygen form CO2. Nitrogen forms atmospheric nitrogen. These are the smallest particles in our body. They come together and form molecules like the water molecules, for example. And then we start forming cells and organelles. Organelles are little tiny organs within the cells. Cells form tissues. Tissues form organs. Organs form organ systems. And then pretty soon we got us and the human organism down here. So if you are not a visual person, here's a nice list showing everything tucked in here, atoms through organisms. So atoms, molecules, and organelles, single cells, tissues. Tissues are clusters of similar cells. Thing to remember. You might want to circle that for whatever reason. Organs are two different types of tissues together. Two or more different types of tissues. Most organs are made up of a variety of tissue types. The heart is muscle tissue and connective tissue that surrounds it. So you have at least two different types there. The liver. You have different types of cells in the liver, different types of tissues in here. So within the body, we do have 11 distinct organ systems. The largest organ system is the skin. The old question is, which is the biggest organ in the body? And everybody says the brain or the liver, when it's actually the skin. I guess it's all in how you say it. So the integumentary system, fancy name for the skin. The skin, the sweat glands, the oil glands, our hair, and our nails, finger and toe. It is designed to protect us from the outside. Pathogens, those are disease-causing bacteria and funguses and viruses, can't penetrate our skin. Our skin is water resistant, almost waterproof, but at least definitely water resistant. And these pathogens and even healthy bacteria, for example, can't penetrate the skin. It's an impermeable layer, meaning it can't get through. By the way, viruses are not living organisms. They are simply particles. I'll say that right now. Even though we say we got to kill the virus, we say the virus can't live. That's it's convenient to say that, but in reality, a virus is not alive. A virus is nothing more than a strand of DNA or a strand of RNA, nucleic acids, wrapped around by a coat of protein. And all it is a programming code designed to make copies of itself. And so when it infects a cell, it takes over the DNA in the cell's nucleus and tells the cell to make more copies of the virus. And when the cell is full, the cell explodes and releases more viruses out into the host, us, for example. And that's when we start feeling ill, as we say, symptomatic. So very, very small particles. Now, they can't get through the skin. Bacteria can't get through the skin. Funguses can't get through the skin. But we assist all those pathogens by rubbing our eyes, rubbing our nose, touching our mouth, drinking something, eating something that's been exposed. So we assist these pathogens in getting into our bodies, but they will not come crawling through our skin. You were in a classroom and you had your hands on your desk, which you probably would. Back in the day when we have different classes coming through the classrooms, you didn't know who was there before you. And so you were picking up the bacteria on your skin that had been there a little bit before, even if, unless the classroom had been wiped down. I know that when we teach on the ground, the classrooms are sanitized and wiped down now after every class. But back in the day, I hate that phrase. Prior to the pandemic, we'd only wipe down at the end of the day. Now, granted, most pathogens don't survive very long outside of the host, but still. But we assist that. We facilitate and assist the. I'm playing two words in one. Assist. Assist. Anyway, we allow stuff to get into our bodies by touching our faces, and we expose our mucous membrane. But our skin also protects us from the outside. It keeps us warm. It keeps us cool. We sweat to cool down. Our skin stays lubricated thanks to the oils from the oil glands. Our skin covers our muscles and protects our muscles and our organs. The organs in our abdominal cavity, in our belly, we don't have a whole lot of protection there. All we have is our skin. And then something else that our skin does for us is it makes vitamin D. Vitamin D is absolutely essential for allowing us to absorb calcium in our diet. And while this sounds like a commercial for milk or something, vitamin D is what we use to maintain high levels of calcium in our bone and for our nerves, and muscles. While we need to have calcium in our bones for strength, we also need calcium for our muscles to contract properly and for our nerves to send signals. So we have a very large need for calcium. And thanks to vitamin D, we can absorb the calcium in our gut that we eat. And speaking of calcium, we keep most of our calcium in our skeletal system. We have our bones. Our bones probably have 99% of the available calcium in storage for us. And we raid our bones as we get older, particularly if you're a postmenopausal female. Postmenopausal females don't replenish their bones, the calcium in their bones as rapidly and as efficiently as a premenopausal, a fertile female. That's a good term for it. Because the release of estrogen while the female is fertile, up to menopause, the release of estrogen allows her to build stronger bones. Well, guess what? At menopause, the ovaries stop releasing estrogen. Bone density can drop. The need for calcium is still there, but we're not replenishing it as quickly. And so, older females may experience a condition known as osteoporosis, where they're breaking down bone quicker than they're building it up, because their bodies still need calcium, but they're not for muscles and nerves, but they're not replenishing it in their bone as quickly as they could. We'll talk about that and get into the bone chapter. Our bones do a really good job for us. Our bones hold us upright. Our bones act as levers for our muscles because our muscles alone aren't strong enough for us to move. So the muscles will amplify their strength using the bones as levers. The bones protect us. The most protected structures in our body are the brain and spinal cord, because we have the skull, we have the spinal column surrounding that. And that's where the central nervous system is located. That's where we are in that section. So we protect it with the skull, we protect it with the spinal cord, we protect the heart and lungs, trachea and esophagus and the large vessels with our ribs surrounding the thoracic region, our thoracic cavity, the chest cavity, protected by our ribs. We don't have protection again until we get down to the pelvic cavity, because our abdominal cavity, everything below our diaphragm, is wide open with no protection. The bones also are where we produce blood cells. We have in the middle of our bones, you have an area known as the bone marrow. Now, at our age, most of our bone marrow is yellow, but there are regions that are still called red bone marrow, and that's where the term hematopoiesis comes from. Hematopoiesis is means making blood cells. Red cells, white cells, and platelets. All 7 types of blood cells all come out of our red bone marrow, and that's taken care of by our bones. And then, of course, we store calcium and phosphorus in our bones too. Our muscles work with our bones. As I said, the muscles pull on bones to use them as levers to amplify the strength. Muscles allow us to move. The muscles pull on tissues called tendons and ligaments that pull on the bones, because the muscles don't pull directly on the bones, they pull indirectly. So we can move, we can pump blood, we can talk, we can walk, we can sit upright, we can lay down, we can take notes, we can move our hands around, we can make facial expressions. Our facial muscles are designed for facial expressions to show how we feel about things. Some of those facial muscles are very thin. They don't do a whole lot. We have a muscle here in the front called the frontalis. Clever name. It doesn't do a whole lot for us, but it does allow us to show expression, whether we like something or we don't like something, whether we're happy or sad. Something else our muscles do is maintain our body heat. Our body heat is pretty much constant at 98.6 or 37 degrees Celsius. You're going to hear me say it that way again and again and again. But that heat is coming off of our skeletal muscles. When our muscles burn sugar for energy, that's how we get our energy. It's by burning sugars, oxidizing sugars, I should say. We burn them. But we release the energy stored in the sugar. And about 60% of that energy comes off as heat. We maintain a constant temperature thanks to that. Now, what controls all this? Well, our nervous system is one of two controlling systems in our bodies. It is the fast-acting control system. Where I said earlier that a nerve impulse can travel 300 miles an hour, and in some places, the furthest it has to go is 3 or 4 feet. There's a great big nerve that runs down from your hip all the way to your great toe. It runs down behind your knees, called the sciatic nerve. It's actually about the thickness of your thumb. That's the longest, probably the longest nerve in the human body. And that's where we see speeds of up to 300 miles an hour going through that nerve. Well, to us, that's instantaneous. And we say that, and this is part of the fast acting control system. It's so fast to us, it is instant. We can't tell. We don't see any delay. It's like when you turn on a light switch. You turn on the light, the light's on. You don't see the delay. There was a delay, but not that we can perceive. The same with nerves. There's a delay. We can't perceive it. But our nervous system is the brain, the spinal cord, and all the nerves that feed into and out of the brain and spinal cord, that are communicating with all parts of our body. We respond very quickly. You hear a sound, you turn your head in the direction of the sound. You detect odors or tastes. You detect pressure and pain. You respond instantly. That is a very fast control system. It is one of two control systems. It is the fast control system. We've got the cardiovascular system, the heart and the blood vessels. This is pretty straightforward. The heart pumps blood. It's a 4-chambered heart. The right side pumps to the lungs. The right side receives blood from the body and pumps to the lungs, or the lungs are going to reload the oxygen that was used on the pass through the body. The blood that's been oxygenated goes to the left side, to the left receiving chamber, and then is pumped to the whole body, which comes back around into the right side of the heart again, over and over and over again. The heart pumps, the heart contracts every 7/10 of a second. And it spends most of that 7/10 of a second in rest. The pumping phase is very short. Now here is the other control system, the endocrine system. This is based on a series of glands in our bodies. We have the pineal gland. The pineal gland is a little gland that dangles down at the base of our brain, and it secretes a hormone, a chemical messenger, if you will, a hormone that keeps us awake during the day and allows us to sleep at night. It's called melatonin. Really is it's called melatonin. And so that helps to regulate our day and night cycles. someone that works shift work and goes from first shift to third shift may have difficulty the first couple of days because at night, we get how do we know it's night? Well, our eyeballs tell us it's dark out. Those visual cues tell us, start shutting down, a lot of the activities that our bodies do during the day, because it stimulates this pineal gland to release melatonin, which allows us to get sleepier and get tired. So if you're working shift work and you're tired because you're going from first shift to third shift suddenly, it's not your fault. It's because of your hormones. Don't try to use that argument, but it is difficult. Just like working third shift and then trying to sleep during the day, because your visual cues are telling you, oh, it's light out. I should be up. Doesn't matter that I'm tired. So, other glands, pituitary gland, the master gland of the body. It releases 8 different hormones, these chemical messengers. We call it the master gland because it affects the activity of other glands in the body, and it's the only gland that produces so many hormones at one time. We have the thyroid gland, sits in the middle of our neck, helps to control how rapidly our metabolism operates. We have the thymus gland, a little gland that used to sit in the middle of our chest. It was very large when we were infants, and now it has shrunk down to the size of your little finger. It's where white blood cells go to mature. It's part of our immune system. White blood cell, half the white blood cells, what we call the lymphocytes, half of the lymphocytes migrate to the thymus gland when we're infants, and they're trained to be what we call immunocompetent, which is a nice way of saying they recognize foreign invaders, whether it's a transplant or it's a pathogenic bug, if you will. We don't say germs, by the way, in this class. We say pathogens. We don't say bugs either. It will be taught to recognize, these white cells will be trained by the thymus gland to recognize all of our tissues. Not trained to recognize foreign pathogens, but trained to recognize our tissues, so that when a white cell, a lymphocyte encounters a foreign substance, it will say, hey, that's not one of us. Let's kill it. That's what white cells like to really like, kill things. And so we call these white blood cells T cells or T lymphocytes because they were trained in the thymus gland. So they are the T lymphocytes. We have another type of lymphocyte, white cell, called the B lymphocyte that became immunocompetent in the bone marrow. And that's what produces our antibodies. Our antibodies are what we make in response to an infection to help remove the pathogen, control the infection. So we'll talk about that. AP2. The adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands sit on top of our kidneys. They're little tiny structures. Our kidneys are only about 3 inches long anyway. And the adrenal glands sit on top of those. And the adrenal glands are 2 separate and distinct glands. The outer layer deals with fluid levels and glucose. It helps maintain glucose levels. Believe it or not, it's not just the pancreas and insulin. The adrenal glands play a role here too. The adrenal glands also release sort of what we saw the generic sex hormones. They're called the androgens. The androgens are thought to help trigger the onset of puberty. The other hormones released by the adrenal gland are called epinephrine and norepinephrine, what we used to call adrenaline. We'll talk about the fight or flight response as we get further into the course, and that's triggered by the nervous system, but it causes the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. And of course, the pancreas. The pancreas releases insulin when we eat a donut or an apple, or a slice of bread or a carrot, anything with carbohydrates in it. We're going to see an increase in our blood sugar. Well, our blood sugar can be brought back down by releasing insulin. Normal body response. If our blood sugar is too low, we release another hormone called glucagon to take sugar out of the liver and put it into our blood so that we still have, normal levels of sugar for energy. And of course, the ovaries and testes. The ovaries release estrogen and progesterone, and the testes release testosterone, the female and male sex hormones. This endocrine system, while it is the slower acting control system, regulates our body growth. It triggers puberty. It takes us through puberty. It maintains fertility in the female for probably 40 years after puberty starts. Menopause occurs in the female 50, at least more than likely 40 years after the onset of puberty. So the female is fertile for probably 40 years in here, all controlled by estrogen and progesterone and other hormones coming from the pituitary gland. Long-term effects, 40 years of effects. The male is even longer. When the male hits puberty, he starts producing testosterone. He will produce testosterone till the day he dies. So 60, 70, 80, 90 years of testosterone production, maybe even 100 years, I don't know. Begs the question, just because a 90-year-old can generate sperm to impregnate a female, should he? And we'll talk about that maybe too. Anyway, that's reproduction and metabolism. Our endocrine system regulates our metabolic activity by stimulating the release of thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone increases the rate at which our cells burn up fuel. And so you may have heard the phrase about low thyroid activity and stuff like that. That's exactly what we're talking about here. The thyroid regulates our, what we call our metabolic activity, how rapidly we can burn through fuels. Lymphatic system. Our lymphatic system is a parallel circulatory system that you may or may not have heard of. You've probably heard of lymph nodes. You may have gone to your doctor one day when with a sore throat or a fever and whatever, and they're palpating around under your jaw, and they're feeling around your neck and your throat. So, oh, your glands are swollen. Well, what they're talking about are your lymph nodes. Your lymph nodes are swollen here because they're fighting an infection. Perhaps your tonsils are inflamed. Lymphatic system consists of a series of vessels, very similar to blood vessels, designed to collect lymphatic fluid. Now, where does lymphatic fluid come from? Well, it turns out that our regular blood vessels are very leaky. See, blood is made of water and mostly red cells with some white cells and platelets thrown in there. The water is salt water. It's about 50% more or less salt water in our blood, 45, 55, somewhere in that neighborhood. We'll just say 50%. The blood is 50% salt water now. Well, our blood vessels are leaky and water leaks out outside the vessels. I mean, it's not this sealed hose or tube that we imagine. So water leaks out and it soaks the cells in our bodies. We call that stuff interstitial fluid, meaning water that's around, interstitial fluid around the cells. Well, eventually we get tired of having that water there and new water is coming in, so we collect it in these lymphatic vessels, and we return it to our blood. We don't waste it, we return it. And most of it goes back into our blood. But before it gets into our blood, we run it through our lymph nodes. We have lymph nodes scattered throughout our body in our cervical region here around our neck, in the axillary region in our armpit, down through the inguinal region in our groin. And so the role there is to filter this fluid, filter the fluid to look for things that are wrong. Because the lymph nodes are where the white cells hang out. And they're in there, most of the white cells are there looking for bad things to kill. That's essentially what they do. They kill things. There's even a type of white blood cell known as a natural killer cell, looking for pathogens to kill. So we collect this fluid and we filter the fluid, and then we look for pathogens. Our lymphatic system is based off of the red bone marrow, where we make the B lymphocytes, the thymus, where we make the T lymphocytes, the spleen, where we filter our blood, and we also take out the old red cells, the lymph nodes, and the vessels. This is what, and again, this is where most of our white cells hang out, waiting for things to, that don't look right, so they can attack it. And so, if your lymph nodes are swollen, or your tonsils are swollen, if you still have your tonsils, then that's an indication that you probably have an infection going on. So, the respiratory system, fairly straightforward. The lungs, the nasal cavity, the oral cavity, the trachea, that's our airway, the bronchi, and the lungs themselves. The goal here is to have gas exchange. Bring air in, move air out, allow oxygen to go into the blood, allow CO2 to come out of the blood. Pretty straightforward. A lot of mechanics involved here. We deal with pressure changes. We deal with diffusion, movement across cell membranes in two different directions. We deal with chemical changes. So it's a fairly sophisticated process every time we take a breath. We take a breath 15 times a minute, every 4 seconds. Digestive system, you're going to hear more about this if you ever wanted to in AP2 lab. That's the only place we get to cover it. So, so near the end of the lab in AP2, near the end of the semester, you'll hear all about this. But we start with the oral cavity, the mouth, and end with the rectum and anus. And we go through the whole process of digestion. Digestion starts in our mouth, continues in our stomach. Absorption of nutrients takes place in the small intestine. Waste products accumulate in the large intestine and are passed out through the rectum and the anus. We release the nutrients, the carbohydrates, the fats, and the proteins from the food that we take in. Next, we have the urinary system. The urinary system is the kidneys and the ureters. Those are the tubes leading from the kidneys to the urinary bladder, and the urethra that allows us to get rid of urine. We take out waste products that are based on nitrogen. And so our kidneys, which are only about 3 inches long, your average kidney will fit in the palm of your hand. They are going to help regulate our water levels, our salt levels, and salt and potassium and calcium levels, and regulate our acid and base levels, these little structures here. They are so important that if the kidneys fail, your patient will be dead in 48 hours. Sort of in general. So, because they're that important, because waste products will accumulate. Once the kidneys fail, it only takes about 2 days for enough of the chemical toxins in the body to accumulate enough to kill your patient. Now, take a look at this picture here. A lot of techniques that we have to look at the human body, non-invasive techniques are the best, because we don't have to open anything up. And the earliest of the non-invasive techniques to look inside was that's still in use is the X-ray. X-rays are great. They're great for bones. They're not so good on soft tissue. Soft tissue, see, the X-rays work by reflecting the radiation waves. X-rays are, it's radiation. So X-rays work by reflecting that back. Dense material reflects back the X-ray. And so we can see things like bones. And in this case, nails. Now, this begs the question, why would someone swallow 87 nails? They don't look like little nails either. These look like fairly large nails. And you'll notice not only are most of the nails appear to be stuck here in the stomach. This is the area of the stomach. They're actually almost following the curvature of the stomach. We see a pretty fair number of them down here in the large intestine. And the question is, why? People do strange things. And in healthcare, you got to be around to pick up the pieces afterwards. In this case, you have an individual. Now, X-ray would be ideal. Would you use an MRI scan on an individual with 87 nails in their stomach? Only if the nails were aluminum. I certainly wouldn't want to put someone in an MRI, a magnetic resonance imagery machine with 87 iron-based, steel-based nails in there. That would be extremely interesting, but probably very unpleasant. So this is a really, very old school. X-ray is very old school, but it's still very useful. Who hasn't had an X-ray? I digressed on that simply because we were still in the digestive system. So, and let me go back and point out that this is all soft tissue. I know that's the stomach because because that's the location for the stomach, and the stomach has a curve like that. You can sort of see parts of the large intestine here in shadow, but you can't see much of anything else because, again, X-rays don't work well on soft tissue. An X-ray is only effective on bone and objects like that. Like here, the vertebrae show up very nicely. The hip bones show up very nicely. You can sort of see the ribs here, but you don't get to see much else. But those nails show up very nicely. Reproductive systems, male and female systems. In the male, we have the prostate, the penis, the testes, the scrotum, and the vas deferens. The main function of the reproductive system is in the male is to produce semen and sperm and testosterone. And the role then is to deliver sperm cells into the female reproductive tract. That's what the reproductive system does here. The urethra in the penis is the delivery tube, if you will. It also does double duty as the urethra for the urinary bladder. The female system is a lot more complicated. The female has a separate urethra connected to the urinary bladder. We have the mammary glands designed to, in the female, they are functional and can produce milk. We have the paired ovaries, which are analogous to the paired testes. The ovaries produce eggs, usually one egg every month during the reproductive lifetime of the female, the 40 years or so from puberty to menopause. We have the uterine tubes or oviducts or fallopian tubes. We have the uterus and the vagina. The vagina serves as the birth canal, the passageway, the receptacle for the penis. The uterus is where a fertilized egg will implant and the baby will grow there. And the once birth occurs, then the mammary glands will produce milk. It runs on a very regulated cycle. The uterus and the ovaries run on 28-day cycles that run simultaneously. The day of ovulation is always considered the 14th day of the cycle. Doesn't matter if it was the 13th day or the 15th day, it's considered the 14th day because from ovulation to the onset of menstruation is always 14 days. Okay, so I've got almost 11, so I'm gonna stop here and get us out of here. I hope it will get better. This first chapter is always tedious, but I appreciate you all being here. And if you have lab this afternoon, I'll see you around 1 o'clock. And we'll be looking at, there's a lab schedule in eLearn for your labs. And the dates there are very specific. So today, this is what we're going to do, and you can find all that content in eLearn by, I guess by week 1. So, okay, so I want to get us out of here, and I'll see you all on Thursday for lecture.